When we think of diving, we usually think of pioneering souls who took to the seas strapped to rudimentary equipment to reach previously unimaginable depths, or perhaps a military diver who gazed at his luminous watch under the cover of darkness. Today's watch pays homage to neither of these influences, but instead looks to Japan for inspiration. For centuries, Japan has been home to the Ama, predominantly female divers who originally dove for food and shells. For the last century, though, they've become known far more widely for their collection of pearls in the waters around Japan. Whilst numbers have dropped in recent years, training continues to be rigorous as Ama divers would begin their training at 12 and continue past the age of 70. For those who enjoy Bond novels, we're introduced to this culture in Ian Fleming's You Only Live Twice. These brave freedivers were the inspiration for the watch which I have here today, and have influenced everything from the style of the watch to the very material of the dial. Before I begin the video though, do remember to go over to watchchronicler.com to read full articles, new releases and reviews there, but also follow us on Instagram to be able to catch more content before it launches, whether it's on the website or on YouTube or from one of our podcasts. Currently available for pre-order, I have here today the Albany Ama, the first dive watch from the brand and a piece which strikes me as very refreshing, and I've had the opportunity to wear this watch for a few weeks as a result of being lent it by the company, and I think I've had time to take in all the forms and the aspects of this timepiece. And taking the form of a 300 metre steel dive watch, the Ama is designed after the shapes of the 1960s and 70s. The case dimensions are also extremely conservative, with a diameter of 40mm and a thickness of 12.8mm, a very respectable thickness for a watch with such water resistance. The shape of the case is reminiscent of the Seiko 62 MAS, as a simple, elegant skin diver. However, the lines of this case are more refined, and the lugs taper as they reach their ends. On the subject of the lugs, I love the fact that they taper inwards and downwards to a 20mm lug width, thus giving a comfortable curved form and a shorter length. A nice touch, I must admit, is that as aesthetically inspiring as this watch is, it still has simple convenience of drilled lugs to fully enjoy the bracelet and strap options. The finishing of the case is entirely brushed, which complements the gentle curvatures at the top of the lugs, whilst the grain is more prominently brushed than satin finished. What I mean by this is that the watch feels more primitive or even coarse, but in a very calculated and deliberate way, an aspect which conveys the inspiration of this watch very well. The case really looks like it's been beautifully hewn from a chunk of steel, and the caseback is more overt with its depiction of the Ama, with their influence on this watch. Whilst the image on the production version is slightly revised, the representation of an Ama diver as photographed by Iwase Yoshiyuki prior to the Second World War appears on the caseback of this prototype. The care seen on this caseback is rather delightful, as the image of the diver in a loincloth and the rest of the text here is picked out in iridescent purple. As a sign of attention, the Ama text has been converted into a logo specifically for this model, which appears on the caseback as well as on the dial. These aesthetic touches match the paint-filled logo on the top of the crown. Thanks to the domed caseback and its thickness, the case is built to withstand 300 metres of water, which for a watch of this size is respectable. The crown and bezel of this watch present another allusion to the elemental and less technological inspiration. Shaped into tall, wide ridges, the crown gives a superb grip, although it isn't particularly comfortable to operate. On the plus side, it is extremely easy to manipulate and sinks partially into the case when screwed in. It is of course unguarded, but I don't think this will be a problem for anyone because of its shape, size and position. The bezel rim, whilst overhanging the case to amount to a width of 41.5mm, is easy to use thanks to the large grips which protrude from its rim. These mirror the crown's edge and give a very unified form whilst being elevated from the surface of the case. The dial of this watch truly is one of a kind. It comes either with a more simple black surface or a vibrant fumé blue one. The one which I have here, however, is for me the most interesting. It's composed of mother of pearl from the sea, which is added to a brass dial and then surface sprayed. The result is a very subtle appearance which at first could be mistaken for glossy black. When it hits the light, the surface becomes clear and gives a wonderful iridescence reminiscent of the Ama divers themselves and the work which they conduct on a daily basis. The markers are painted onto the dial surface and rimmed with green in gradients to create a sort of webbing between the markers. The result is to my eye very appealing. My only complaint here will be that I find the 12 o'clock marker to be somewhat small in relation to the others, although this is a purely stylistic quibble. The bezel insert is very narrow and, like the domed sapphire crystal over the dial, is topped with scratch-resistant sapphire. Albany have done a very good job of incorporating the bezel design with matching green and luminous markers every 5 minutes. The result is discreet but practical, something easily lost on a watch so stylistically driven. The hands on a no-date watch are perhaps particularly vulnerable to scrutiny due to the lack of any other distractions and their conventionally larger size. In the case of this watch, Albany have chosen to use an arrow minute hand and a short hour hand. To my eye, the minute hand was a good choice as it uses the colour of the dial details and uses it to enhance legibility. The hour hand, however, is more of a mixed point for me. Its length and white Swiss Superluminova BGW9, as is used across all luminous elements, makes it legible, yet I find the glossy black paint somewhat distracting, as this highlights minor imperfections in finishing. The second hand, though, is like nothing I've seen before. Shaped like a spear, it has a barb on one side, and adds a great looking touch. The luminescence of this watch is the only aspect which I feel doesn't stand up to the rest of the product, due to the nature of BGW9 as a somewhat weak luminous paint. As it's painted on a relatively small set of markers across the hands, dial and bezel, it can be hard at times to orientate the watch, whilst the bezel can be difficult to read after a few hours. For this price it's perfectly respectable and usable for the most part, but don't expect the glow of the equivalent Seiko, which will last for many hours and remain extremely legible. Mechanically, this watch uses one of the best movements at this price range, the Miyota 9039. For quite a while, watch designers at this price range have used the standard version of this premium Japanese movement, the 9015, for no-date watches and left a free position on the crown. However, Miyota now offers the 9039, a no-date equivalent which offers you essentially all that you would get from an ETA or Solita movement, but this time from Japan rather than Switzerland. It hacks, hand winds and runs at 8 ticks per second for a very smooth run, in addition to having very efficient automatic winding and a 41-hour power reserve. In short, it's about ideal for this watch, and gives you a perfect balance of functionality and specifications combined with value and also serviceability in the long term. If you choose to buy this watch, you get 2 or 3 strap options depending upon the price. For $375 you receive this watch with a NATO strap and a rather appealing Italian nubuck strap in addition to a wooden box and canvas watch roll. However, for $420 you also get the beads of rice bracelet which I have here. This fits the wrist very well, and for an extra $45 is absolutely the version you should get if you have any remote enjoyment of metal bracelets. The build is very supple on the wrist and is fully brushed to match the case. One change which may be made is the replacement of the photograph deployment clasp with a ratcheting one on the finished piece. The case shape itself fits on my 7-inch wrist with absolute ease, and I have every confidence that it would also fit smaller wrists with just as much comfort because of its shape. This watch then is a bit of a conundrum, but in just the right way. Its stylistic care would suggest more of a dress diver, more focused on style than substance. However, the reality is this is a very well-priced and well-built watch for almost any application, and which has been conceived with a great deal of sense and clear care in terms of producing the nicest watch to take inspiration from the Ama divers and their way of going about diving, which is very different to what we normally see in a dive watch. For these reasons, if you like this watch and you appreciate the styling and the inspiration, this is a great watch to have, and I look forward to seeing what this brand does next. Anyway, I'll conclude the video there, but thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, then do like, share and subscribe to see more here on the channel. So this is Armon from WatchChronicler.com, out.